Okay, good evening everybody and welcome to tonight's Planning and Control meeting. Can I just ask all of you either to switch your phones off or put them on silent, please? Because if one goes off, everybody's rushing around seeing whose it is. Okay, late items to be introduced by Chair. I have none. Do we have any declarations? Sorry, I forgot the apologies. Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. I've got apologies from Councillor Tracy Pearce, Councillor Potter and Councillor Prosser.
Thank you. Yeah. Declarations of interest? No? Okay. Minutes of the meeting held on 8th of September 2022. Would somebody like to move it? Seconded? Thank you. Everybody in agreement? Okay. Thank you. Minutes of the meeting of the Conservation and Heritage Advisory Committee, which was held on the 7th of July 2022. No. Thank you. Item 6, appeals decisions, and to tell us about that is Ian.
Many thanks, Chair. Yes, it was an application to erect a dwelling at the side of a property on Finchley Avenue up in Mackworth. We determined the application under delegated powers. We don't refuse many applications for residential development on the grounds that normally we've had pre-application discussions and lots of jobs are, as you know from the performance report, determined under delegated authority, and most are approved. In this particular case, we had some contextual concerns relative to the neighbour and also the character of that part of the street scene, and so we refused it on 2 grounds. The inspector provided a fairly thorough appraisal, and the appeal was dismissed on the grounds of impact on a neighbour who was located sort of at 90 degrees to the plot. And so, yes, a good result, Chair, and I'll take any questions. Thank you.
It was a good result, Ian. Thank you. Anybody have any questions? No? Okay, thank you. Item 7, applications to be considered tonight. And the first one is Carlton Road, pages 1 to 11. To tell us about that is Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. Members will recall this was deferred at the July committee meeting, and members carried out a site visit to the property on the 24th of August to consider the impacts of the use on Carlton Road and in terms of parking and highways issues. The proposal seeks full permission for change of use of a semi-detached house to a 6-bedroom, 8-occupant house of multiple occupation at 78 Carlton Road. There are no external alterations proposed as part of the application, and roof alterations shown on the plans comprising hip to gable and rear dormer can be carried out under existing permitted development rights. There's no off-street parking with the property, and cycle storage is proposed to be provided in rear garden. 4 third-party objections and an objection from Councillor Bonser have been received. Concerns raised mainly related to insufficient parking for residents, highway safety issues, noise and disturbance, and loss of family housing. The Highways Officer's got no objections to the use on the basis that there are no impacts of on-site parking, so it would not be the impacts of no on-site parking would not be severe. There is on-street parking in the vicinity, and therefore we don't have concerns about an acceptable impact on highway safety. Housing standards would license the HIMO use and have raised no concerns about the proposed internal layout. And we are satisfied that the use would provide a high-quality living environment and would not result in harm to residential amenity of existing residents in the area. Overall, the proposed 6-bedroom HIMO is considered acceptable in this location, delivering additional new housing, no adverse impacts on the highway, on local character or on residential amenity. It accords with local plan policies as well as the overarching NPPF, so we're recommending it for approval with suggested conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Members of the committee. Councillor Kerr.
It's the situation with houses like this changing their nature from a family dwelling to a set of unrelated people is something that people find very difficult, and I can understand that. But we know that there is a need for housing within the city, and the number of people living in a property like this, in this form, can be no different to a large family living in a house like this. So in terms of numbers, I think the report is right. But what is different is that there is likely to be a greater turnover of people in this property than you would have with a family house. And the greater turnover will mean that things like responsibility for bins, knowledge about travel from this area is not something which will be as easily communicated as within a family. And those, I think, are the reasons why something like this needs to come to us, so that we can provide extra guidance and support to the operators of a building like this to ensure that waste and travel is controlled and made as sustainable and less of a problem than it would otherwise be. And therefore, I think it's conditions that we can place which go beyond what housing can do are important. So if we approve this, Chair, I think it's important that we make some statement about travel planning and the expectations that the operator will have in terms of travel planning. The cycle parking that's being proposed, unless it's changed from when we made the site visit, I don't think is adequate. They were looking at a little dilapidated shed in the back garden, which had very poor access for getting bicycles into it. And in terms of waste management, the responsibility for who's going to put the bins out, who's going to fetch them back in again, who's going to make sure that the right things are going into the right bins, that sort of thing needs to be managed through sufficient information. And the other element that we haven't talked about before, but I think is important in a situation like this, is who's looking after the outside space, and to make sure that the garden area doesn't become a problem to gardens next door. So if, Chair, we're going to approve this, I think we need to make sure that we're making full use of the benefits of it having come to planning, so that we can have more control over the way that the building operates in practice. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Anybody else on that? Sarah, in terms of the things that Councillor Kerr is talking about, which ones can we sort of legally or practically ask them to do?
In terms of cycle parking, there is a condition on in the report, but we can ask for details to be submitted and approved, so we can beef up that condition. In terms of bin movements and garden maintenance, that we would have to put an informative note as opposed to a condition for that. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Nobody else has got anything to say about it. Would you like to put it to the vote? Anybody second that? All those in favour of the recommendation? 3.
Make 3.
All those against it?
1.
Okay, that's carried. Application number 2 is pages 12 to 33, Littleover Manor, 453 Burton Road. To tell us about this is Sarah again.
Thank you, Chair. This is a site at 453 Burton Road, known as Littleover Manor. Full permission is sought for the redevelopment of a residential property, which currently contains one bungalow, for residential development of 7 dwelling houses. The existing bungalow would be demolished and the site developed 2-storey houses in 2 rows served off a single access onto Burton Road. Each unit would have 2 parking spaces. The site slopes down from Burton Road to properties at the rear on Lime Walk. The area is residential in character and there are trees on the site and there is a TPO on the adjacent property at 451 Burton Road. 17 objections the parties have been received, and from Councillor Lonsdale, who raised concerns about traffic impacts, loss of privacy, noise and loss of trees. In principle, the development is acceptable in this location, given the net gain of 6 new dwellings to the city's housing supply, and having regard for the tilted balance, this weighs heavily in favour of proposal in policy terms. Parking and access layout has been amended during the life of the application, and the Highways Officer satisfied the revised layout would have no adverse impacts on the highway network or highway safety. In terms of residential amenity, we're satisfied that the proposed housing would not result in significant harm to neighbouring properties in terms of massing or privacy. Regard has been had for a previous appeal decision from 2015 for a similar housing development on the site which was allowed, despite members' concerns at that time about highways impacts and surface water, drainage and flooding. In relation to flood risk, land drainage colleagues are satisfied that there are no flooding issues on the site and that drainage can be dealt with through a suitable SUD scheme through condition. Biodiversity has been considered through bat surveys of the site, and Derbyshire Wildlife Trust are satisfied that this is not a constraint for development and a habitat enhancement scheme would also be secured through condition. There are TPO trees on the neighbouring property which should be retained, and the condition recommended to secure an arboriculture method statement and tree protection plan. Having regard for the 2015 permission, the impacts on the trees on the neighbouring property are very similar, and we're satisfied that protection measures can be controlled through recommended conditions. Proposed development is considered acceptable in this residential location and accords with relevant local plan policies and overarching guidance in the NPPF. So it's recommended for approval, subject to the conditions in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sarah. I believe we have 2 speakers on this. Mr. De Souza first. Good evening, Mr. De Souza, and you have 3 minutes.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak today. We would like to point out 2 significant concerns that we have. The first one has to do with drainage. The plot has a 6% inclination, and currently most of it is soil and trees which help to drain off excess rainwater. The present plan aims to build 7 houses within a pavement which will have much less porosity and will increase the chance that excess rainwater may go down and flood properties in Lime Walk. Let me remind everyone here that Lime Walk has had floodings in the past, and that an environmental report produced when Limegate Mews were being constructed has highlighted Lime Walk as a high-risk flooding area. The previous plan for the development of this site included the use of water pumps, but the present plan makes absolutely no provision for this. In a time of climate change and with more extreme rain events likely to happen, we feel that the present plans do not safeguard the houses in Lime Walk sufficiently in what floods are concerned, and we actually recommend this room to decline the proposal. The other point that we have is about the height of the houses. The developers agree that the height of the neighboring houses are 2 stories high, but they want to build 3-story high houses, which in my calculations is a 33% increase in height. And this is even more important because in the planning application submitted, there is no specific height of the houses. There is only a sketch with a ruler that, if you read, says for guidance only, do not scale. We do not know the height of the houses, but we do know that the houses at the bottom side of the plot will be built at a significantly higher altitude than all of the houses in Lime Walk and a lot of the houses in Limegate Mews. These 2 factors will create houses at the bottom of the plot that will tower existing structures, and they will take privacy away from people who bought their houses in the area and were expecting to have that privacy. I'm not a planning developer expert, but I think new developments should adapt to old development and not the other way around. I think a lot of attention has been given to the properties at the top, so they're in keeping with Burton Road, but not enough attention has been given to the properties at the bottom, and these are the ones that are really going to impact people living in the area. We would like, therefore, to suggest two conditions. Condition number one is that the first ground floor on the houses at the bottom of the plot are built at the level of the lowest altitude of the plot, which is in the southeastern corner. And the second condition would be that the maximum height of the houses matches the maximum height of the houses in Lime Walk, which is 7.5 meters. We know that there is a pressure for building new houses. We're not against the development. We just want a sustainable development. This development is not sustainable.
Thank you. Did you want to come back on this, Sarah, or wait until Mr. Goy is... Okay. Mr. Goy, good evening, and same with you. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Chris Goy, resident at 5 Limegate Mews, representing the views of neighbouring Limegate Mews, Lime Walk, South Avenue and Burton Road. So remaining concerns over the proposed development around access, parking and servicing. So whilst the Highways Agency have now stated they've got no concerns regarding parking in relation to the latest plans, we question how much thought has gone into the practical parking aspects of people living there and in the surrounding streets. The adjacent Limegate Mews development has got 5 2 to 3 bedroom properties totaling 12 bedrooms across the development, with 2 allocated parking spaces per house plus a visitor space on site, making 11 spaces in total. The proposed development at 453 Burton Road is 7 4-bedroom houses, which, whilst greatly increasing the population density in an already noisy area, could in theory result in 28 resident vehicles plus visitor vehicles at the site. However, only 14 parking spaces are provisioned for residents with no visitor parking. Burton Road is double yellow lines. Nearby South Avenue is access only and not to be used for casual parking, and Lime Walk is already over capacity with cars double parked the full length of the road over nearby roads, and other nearby roads are permanent holders only. Question is, where were the additional cars parked? Just last Monday I couldn't get off my own road because somebody had parked across the bottom of the access, and I had to wait 2 hours until somebody came and moved that car. Concerns over subcontractor and developer behaviour to date. So the plans state every effort will be made to retain as much of the existing greenery and mature trees as possible. Despite this, mass felling of mature trees and established bushes took place a few weeks prior to the formal tree survey taking place. In order to undertake the felling, the subcontractor trespassed over the frontage of the adjacent Littleover house, smashing an adjacent fence panel to gain access for large machinery to the rear of the property. This was without the knowledge of the consent of the owner. The fence panel was removed in March and is still missing today. Children were witnessed playing in the garden and even attempting to climb the fence into my garden. The site was subsequently left unsecure, which resulted in homeless people wandering around the rear garden and sleeping rough in outbuildings, which has been reported to the police and confirmed by the police. This has left the surrounding residents concerned for the security of their properties whilst development is in progress, and has set a poor precedent regarding developer and subcontractor behaviour. Concerns over construction noise. So whilst we accept that construction noise is a necessary part of any development, the established nature of the properties and residents in the area have formed a key part of people's decision-making process when moving there. People moving into the area in the last 20 years or so will be well aware of the risk of the development, but no one ever expected it to be anywhere near the size or scale of what's been proposed with the potential for so much noise. The close proximity to the Royal Derby Hospital has made the area a popular location for professionals who are required to work regular night shifts as part of their job, with at least 2 people living adjacent to the development working regular nights. A large number of residents have also been forced to work regularly from home post-pandemic. So whilst the development is within an existing inhabited area, it's not a greenfield site.
I'll have to stop you there. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Just switch your mic off there. Good. Sarah?
Thank you, Chair. There's a bit to go at. I'll start with first comment about drainage and flood risk. The previous application was allowed on appeal because the inspector considered there wasn't any flooding issues, really, so they conditioned a SUDS drainage scheme. On this application that we've received, our land drainage officer basically commented that this site has no flooding of any sort. There is, however, a question of volume and quality control from the runoff of the site. Applicants should consider the use of permeable paving, rain gardens, etc. will be necessary to reduce the flow. 2 litres and infiltration is not possible. So they've raised no objections on flood risk, and a SUDS drainage condition is attached to the report. In terms of the height of the houses are, proposed houses are 2-storey. The rear block, because there is on a sloping site, are 3-storey at the rear and 2-storey at the front, so they're split level houses, but they are 2-storey properties. And the plans, whilst it says not to scale, they are scaled, and we have scaled them off in terms of determination. So, in terms of levels, we've considered the layout as it is submitted. We also have regard for the 2015 application, which was allowed on appeal. It's quite a similar layout in terms of its arrangement, in terms of the number of units, in terms of where the access and parking is. So we have to take that into account. Obviously that was granted permission. In terms of parking, my highways colleague can address the detail, but 2 spaces per unit is the standard. We wouldn't be able to ask for any more than that. And in terms of amenity, there is a construction management plan condition on the report, so that would deal with any issues during construction in terms of protection of amenity, dust, traffic, etc. I don't think there's anything else.
Thank you, Sarah. Members of the committee. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chair. I spoke against the previous application, which was refused by this committee, but as we know, has now been gone through on appeal. The reasons I was against it was to do with not with flooding precisely, but drains. There are a number of unidentified drains on that hillside, some of which continually flooded the basement of one of the houses on Lime Walk, which I had long discussions with. In the end, that particular drain was blocked up. I'm not convinced, because some of the old maps showed other drains that we couldn't find on the hillside, that we should be doing anything on this hillside without a proper survey. So I will be voting against this application, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. 7.7 trees. It seems to be quite a lot of trees there. I mean, I know they're not protected or TPO'd, but 14, it's quite a lot. Most applications, or residential applications of this size that I'm aware of, don't normally involve that amount of trees being removed. I'd like a little bit more discussion on that from an officer perspective, really. Talks about conditions, but I think it's more conditions to protect the trees which are protected nearby. I could just have clarity on that bit.
Sarah?
Yeah, the trees have been looked at during this application and the previous application when the same amount of tree loss was proposed. They weren't considered worthy of a TPO at that point, and they aren't considered worthy of a TPO on this application. So on those grounds, we don't have any real grounds to resist the removal of the trees on the site.
Councillor Holmes.
Thank you. If the committee was minded to approve this, is there any condition that could be put onto this to say that those trees that are lost need to be replenished elsewhere, or even incorporated in the site design, replanting, as I say, in this location, or maybe in another location to compensate the loss?
Sarah, could we look at...
Yeah, we refer you to condition 5, which requires a landscaping scheme to be included with details of trees and shrubs as part of that. So yes, we can require some tree planting.
Councillor Holmes, you're not very happy.
Well, it's just a little bit ambiguous. It may be that 2 trees are planted, and we've lost 14, that's my point.
Councillor Rawson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm also concerned about the loss of trees on this site, so I would certainly support some sort of condition to protect. It sounds as if some of those trees have been lost already, but if we can do as much as we can to protect some of those mature trees that are that are left, then I would certainly support that. Just in terms of the existing structure that's there already, it's a bungalow, I think we've heard. Is there any heritage value or amenity value to the bungalow, just to have that confirmed in terms of the loss of that existing property? And I do, looking at them, they does seem to be a very tight site and quite a number of properties sort of fitted in. So what's the, if one of the officers could perhaps comment on the density of what's proposed in this case and how usual that is compared to some of the other, compared to our guidance and some of the usual applications that we get.
Sarah, Paul, would anybody like to come back on that?
Yeah, just in terms of the bungalow itself, it was approved to be demolished under the 2015 application. It doesn't have any significance in terms of heritage or design quality. In terms of the density, again, it is similar in density to the scheme from 2015. It's the same number of dwellings which was allowed on appeal. I'm going to ask my colleague Andy Sherville to comment on the trees.
Andy?
Hello. I believe the trees were removed during the life of the application, so I didn't really comment on the trees on the site. I would like to see trees planted off-site in mitigation, and that's really all I can say on that. During the life of the application, I didn't comment on the trees that were left post-felling.
Yeah. Paul?
If I can clarify the tree matter, going back to the 2015 inspector's approval, clearly that sets the bench line of what's acceptable on the site in terms of housing and tree loss. We've assessed the trees, Andy will have assessed the trees that are left on site, non-worthy of a TPO, so there is no protection for any of those trees now. I'm not suggesting that anybody does, but they could go overnight. We've got no control over them. I'm going to be talking to members about biodiversity net gain, and when that comes in November 23, yes, then we'll be having this conversation, and those trees need replacing. But until we get to that point, I've got no legislative requirement to make them be replaced. But I have a condition suggested, which on the layout seeks opportunity to get tree planting, and we will take into account concerns, the wider concerns about members about. We won't get 14, but we will get some tree planting on site to help set the site and set it in its own condition, if you like. But I can't control the loss of those trees that are on site.
Thank you. I think Paul's clarified it well. I mean, we don't really have any control if that person living there wants to chop it down. There's nothing we can do. Sorry, Harvey, you're right at the back and you didn't raise your hand high enough.
Sorry, Chair, thank you. So in terms of the trees, we'll keep talking about trees at the moment because it's the favourite subject. But one developed tree would cost 50 new 15 new whips to be planted. So is there no way that we could, and you say we can't condition it, but could we not put something in this Section 106 agreement where there is, I know we haven't got the biodiversity plan yet, however we have passed a climate change emergency. And I think it's ridiculous that we're taking out 14 trees with no replacement. So that's all I would say.
Thank you, Councillor Jennings. Paul?
I would love to be able to ask for replace, or protect the existing trees, full stop. And I think that's what biodiversity net gain brings in, the quality of those trees. For members, members of the public benefit, we have set up a cross-party working group of councillors who are going to help inform the new local plan. And without wishing to preach, I would love to be able to say, right, for every tree you remove, Mr. Developer, I would like 5 new trees planting, period. And we're not arguing about it, we're having it. And that gets enforced by the biodiversity net gain legislation, which comes in. But we're quite a bit way back from that yet. I've got no policy to require it. Yes, we have a climate change or climate implications on the loss of the trees. But as I said at the outset, I've got no control. Those trees could go tonight and we're left with nothing on site. But legitimately, we can require, by condition, a landscaping scheme to be agreed with us, and case officers will note your concerns about the trees. And if the developer's here, they'll note the concerns about the trees and should be coming to us with more than just a couple of whips on that site to help give it a setting. But we're trying to push the envelope a little too soon, but we will get there on wider issues with the policies that I would like to see on a new local plan. Thank you.
Councillor Kerr, I hope you're not going to talk about trees as well, because we've had plenty of it. We got all the answers that Mr. Clark and Sarah can give us, so there's no new information on there. But go ahead.
No, Chair, I wasn't going to talk about those large green plants. I was going to raise 3 things. Firstly, that I'm going to welcome the conditions about solar panels and about cycle parking, both of which potentially will have as much impact as the plants we're not mentioning in terms of climate change. But I particularly wanted to transfer through, there's a comment in the officer comments that I recommend finished floor levels should be conditioned for the avoidance of doubt. That doesn't seem to have been followed through to a condition that I've spotted at the end of that report. And that is actually really vital on a sloping site like this, where we've already heard the concerns about the new properties being overbearing. We need to make sure that we have a condition, and we need to have that condition ensuring that the ground floors are at a level which means that they won't be overpowering of neighbouring houses. We had a really serious consideration of this elsewhere in Little Over on Pastures Hill. I don't want this to be something that follows through. We need to get that condition in, Chair.
Sarah?
Yes, Chair, we can add a condition of floor levels. I think it probably was just an oversight on the officer's part.
Is that satisfactory, Councillor Kerr?
As long as committee votes for it, yes.
Anybody else? Would somebody like to move it to with the commission with the added conditions? So the recommendation that comes is with the added conditions. Anybody want to move it? We'll come back tomorrow. Would anybody like to second it? Thank you. We've got no nominations but 4 seconders.
But Chair, before we vote on it, can I ask if there's a...
I've just asked Lucy for the vote, so you...
No, I know, I'm begging your indulgence.
Okay.
The other factor that has been raised as a concern is the water runoff. The potential for water runoff we've already identified in terms of the additional hard surfacing. We've looked at the hard surfacing from the drainage situation, which we've said is going to be impermeable on the ground, and we've also got the roofing, which we're going to look at as conditioning from the point of view of the drainage on site. And I think it's from the roofs that the drainage is going to be looked at on site. The other factor is people who then put paving slabs all over their back gardens. Can we put a condition in to say that there should be not back gardens shouldn't be paved over or something equivalent to that.
Can we go to that length, Sarah?
I don't think we can reasonably do that. It wouldn't be enforceable, particularly since it is on the rear of people's gardens. So no.
Thank you. Okay, before Lucy thinks of something else, Councillor Olsen said yes and Councillor Jennings seconded it. So all those in favour of the recommendation with the added condition? Five. Anybody against? One. That recommendation is carried with the new conditions. Application number 3, Rickman Road, that's been withdrawn for tonight. So we're moving on to number 4, pages 46 to 57, 23 Cheddesden Park Road. To tell us about that is Ian.
Many thanks, Chair. We were halfway through this item on the 8th of September when the meeting was unfortunately adjourned. So all I'll do, Chair, is add the housekeeping item that I added at the previous meeting, that a proposed site layout was submitted on the 2nd of September showing 3 parking spaces at the front of the property. That, as I say, was tabled before the last meeting and would be tied into condition number 3. In terms of an extension of time, we've got another extension of time agreed with the applicant, and I've got nothing else to raise to the substance of the report, Chair, and would just invite the speakers to address committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Well, we'll have a double act tonight, Mr. Singh and Carly Cherryman. So who would like to go first? Mr. Singh, you have 1.5 minutes each.
Okay. Firstly, thank you for allowing us to speak, Chair. Out of 12 million children living in England, just under 400,000, which is 3%, are in the social care system at any one time. More than 80,000 of these children are children in care. 5AB Care is a value-based provider who wants to change the lives of children. We're an outfit that's got good Ofsted ratings across all our homes. It's in our interest to maintain these ratings and work hard as possible to achieve these best outcomes for children in the homes. Ofsted, who regulate us, and independent inspectors that monitor our homes look at all aspects, including the homes, the surroundings, the relationships and the integration into the community. We understand that there are quite a few objections and a few people that have brought some concerns forward. However, we're happy to work and support where possible to make this work. We're not an institutionalised provider. The adults don't wear badges and around the homes, and we're not branded clothing. We're not that sort of company. We're here to make a difference in children's lives. I'd like to also share that Derby and the surrounding counties struggle to place children close to their families. We've got one example where a child's placed in Bedfordshire, which is over 100 miles away from their family. I mean, put yourself in the shoes of that child. How would you feel if you were 100 miles away from your family and you don't have a place nearby to your home? The property in question has previously been owned by a couple and 4 children. The demographic of that property hasn't actually changed a great deal. In terms of parking, we have plenty of options
Mr. Singh,
around.
you're taking up Carly's time here.
Sorry. Yep, Carly, over to you.
So following on from what Lindsay was saying in the last meeting, we run very small family environments within the children's home. Like Satch just said, we have adults that are very caring, have good moral and value bases. We also make sure that they are approachable people that can parent effectively and that are positive role models for the children that we look after. Since the last meeting, we did invite some of the neighbours round for lunch. They were able to come to one of our current homes. We felt that the visit went very well. They were able to spend time with the children, which the children loved, thought it was great. And we hope that we have alleviated some of the concerns that the neighbours have about the home in Chaddesden. moving forward, we want to build on those relationships and ensure that if there are any concerns, the neighbours are able to speak to the teams. They're always willing to work with the neighbours, have them round for lunch or coffee, and ensure that we can continue with those positive relationships. We're also very careful about the children that live in the homes, so we're thoughtful about their needs and if it's an appropriate environment for them too.
Thank you. That. We have another speaker. Is it Miss Rowe? Good evening, and you have 3 minutes.
Good evening. Chaddeston Park Road is an extremely busy road that has many bus stop points. 2 of these stops are between the 2 opposite side roads, Hanbury Road and Oakley Avenue, which is where the reference property is sited. Hanbury Road has recently been turned into one-way street, which has caused an increase in traffic using Chaddeston Park Road. Road users of Chaddeston Park Road often drive through at high speeds, much exceeding the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. There have been numerous accidents along the road and it does not have any speed control monitoring or traffic calming measures in place. The road and the vehicle volume on it presents a severe health and safety risk for the children, who, given the nature of this application, require additional safeguarding support. Parking along the road impacts traffic flow, including direct through routes for emergency vehicles, and parking on grass verges is not allowed by highways due to damage to the protected trees that line the road. Fixed penalties have been issued for such parking. Turning number 23 into a care home for children who require round-the-clock care and support from a wide range of professionals and carers will significantly add to the above traffic and parking issues on a daily basis, as the driveway to the property cannot accommodate such numbers. To even try would need to remove the tree, the grass on the verge and drop the curb right next to the bus stop. Most of the current residents who live on Chaddeston Park Road are elderly and have resided there for decades. These people have stayed as they have felt safe and secure and supported within the close-knit community. They are not intimidated and reside with confidence. This is now a significant concern, as this application, should it prove successful, will present the risk of antisocial behaviour. These concerns are of enormous importance to these residents and already have a detrimental impact on their mental well-being. Retired people have settled, some of more than 50 years, and have lived in peace and quiet throughout. Many of these people now live alone. The nature of this application presents a significant risk of noise disruption, loss of privacy within their own outdoor space, antisocial behaviour. These very frightening prospects that may have a disastrous impact on the health of local elderly residents who already feel that their voices of vulnerable members of society are not being listened to. The property is physically able to house 4 children and 2 adults, but would not be doing so under the terms of this application. The adults of the property would be present as a roster staff only as part of a wider business plan for profit and gain. This is not the same as a large family unit with nurturing parents that would be present 24/7. Children with severe behavioural and emotional difficulties require round-the-clock care, and with no shift pattern or supporting staff having been made clear, residents are not convinced that this business proposition fulfills safeguarding responsibilities. Consequently, the safety and the well-being of the local community therefore cannot be adequately safeguarded against either. Thank you.
Thank you. Ian, did you want to come back on any of that? Sorry, Mrs. Brown.
Planning doesn't have to worry about the use of the property, nor it seems the size of the rooms. Your only concern is parking, which seems very odd. So can I just say, do you care about children's safety? If so, Chaddeston Park Road is such a very busy road, and it has been made worse by the ill-advised island trial at the junction of Chaddeston Park Road and Hanbury. The cycle inlet is so wide that cars mount the pavement on a regular basis. What is needed on this road are speed cameras. And I know it's not your department, but I think you should talk to the department that deals with it. Fines would be a very good idea, because the funds that you would get would enable us to keep our street lights working. I think I'll leave it at that, actually.
Thank you, Mrs. Brown. Ian, would you like to come back on any of that?
Thank you, Chair. No, I think the report says it all. I appreciate that the applications cause some anxiety amongst the local residents and the population, but I am heartened to hear that you know, Mr. Singh and Carly Cherryman have talked about, you know, what their ambitions are for their business and for the caring of the children. They indicated that the property was previously occupied by a couple with 4 children. This is a controlled use for up to 4 children, so there may not be 4 children there all the time. They will obviously be looked after under the umbrella of Ofsted and other agencies, and it's a residential area, Chair, where you would expect children to grow up and hopefully live in a nurturing environment. I'm also heartened to hear that neighbours were invited round to experience one of the facilities following the last meeting, and throughout the report we've indicated what could be lawfully carried out at that property in terms of small-scale housing, multiple occupation, a large family dwelling and other family-type uses. So there aren't any planning policy reasons or any defensible reasons to resist permission here, Chair, and hopefully the you know, the operators who have spoken tonight will take on board what the residents' concerns are and ensure that it's a properly managed facility that sits very happily in that rather attractive community. Thank you.
Thank you. And before I ask members of the committee to come in, I'd just like to say, I mean, if this was a application for a 6-7 bedroom house in multiple occupation, I would have been the first one to speak against it and say, no, it's not right. But we have to be mindful of one thing, that they could quite easily house 5 adults there without seeking planning permission as a house in multiple occupation. This is for up to 4 children who are going to be supervised, and I fully understand the anxiety that maybe some of the residents are facing, but you have to look at the wider picture that this is something that's going to be controlled with children. You could have 5 individuals living there who the council have no control over because the landlord is going to let them out. At least here, this will be regulated, and this will be within certain conditions that we and licensing impose on it. Councillor Rawson, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I do have concerns about this application for a number of reasons, Chair. We've heard that it is a residential operation, and in many ways it is. But I think in some other important aspects, it is actually ultimately a commercial business that we're looking that's looking to operate in what is a very residential area. So the differences that I can perhaps see resulting from that, yes, there'll be 4 children, and there may have been 4 children in that particular property before, but the nature of looked after children may be that there's a higher turnover so those young people perhaps aren't going to have as long to become embedded in a part of that community. There may very well be various professionals coming and going from the site as a result of the needs of those young people. We've got 3 parking spaces, so there will be obviously members of staff working at the property, which will create extra car journeys probably over and above what it would have been as a residential property. And I think you are also likely to get significantly increased traffic and more car journeys generated as a result of various professionals visiting, social workers, health visitors, psychologists, various different professionals will be involved in supporting those young people. And I think the particular issue about here is is the additional parking facilities that are available there. You can see there is a bus stop outside, so there's no immediate parking for professionals coming and going from the property immediately outside, so that will have a knock-on impact. And I think what has been said about the speed of traffic along there is it's quite a long straight road, and people certainly don't always follow the speed limit. So to try and park on that main road can be quite dangerous at times because of the speed of traffic that's coming and going. Three parking spaces I personally don't think will be enough in order to be able to satisfy the parking requirements for professionals to be visiting there. So there are a number of issues around this that are associated with being a predominantly residential area. We're looking at an application that's asking to bring a commercial operation into that. Without infrastructure, I think that to be able to support the operation adequately. So for those reasons, Chair, I won't be able to support this one, I'm afraid.
Back on anything, Ian?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, in terms of the conditions on Chaddeston Park Road presently, and in terms of the speed of vehicles, you know, my colleagues present tonight and can alert any of his colleagues to those concerns and the monitoring thereof. But in terms of the parking arrangements, we've looked at it carefully. Colleagues have been to site. As your report states on page 49, the proposal will not lead to unacceptable impacts to highway safety. Clearly, it is a residential dwelling. You could have the same turnover of vehicles, possibly more vehicles, visiting the property. It will be a commercial operation, granted, that's the case, but it will be a regulated business, and one would hope that the management team, you know, run this operation as they've said tonight in a caring environment, providing positive role models for those young people, Chair. And so, with that, I'd promote the recommendation.
Thank you, Ian. Yeah. Councillor Rawson, again, I said, you know, I share the concerns, but we've just approved a application on Carlton Road where there's no parking for six bedroom, 8 occupants, and we can hardly turn something down like this, which is 4 occupants with 2 supervisors and 3 parking spaces in an area which has outside parking as well. But one thing, you know, you mentioned about them having professional help and this, I'm afraid that's something we can't take into account tonight because it's not written there, whether they're going to require psychologists or doctors come in there or whatever. You know, that's something that we can't guess or speculate against. So we can only judge what's before us. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, and thanks for leaving that plan up there at the moment, because my concern is that despite having a condition about cycle parking, the proposed cycle parking that we have there would be great for the kids' bikes when you're going out for a ride on a Saturday afternoon. But for somebody who is going to be working there, to drag your bicycle down, go into the house, collect the key to unlock the garden shed, walk your bicycle down to the garden shed in rainy conditions is quite depressing. Whereas I think the cycle parking could be behind that gate on the left-hand side of number 23 as we have it at the moment. We've got gates down both sides of the building, but if we put cycle parking in there, it'd be quite easy to put something in that was reasonably covered. It would be secure behind the gate, and I think that would be a much better cycle solution for members of staff who hopefully will be cycling to work rather than driving. That does, however, Chair, raise another issue, and my observation of care homes is that quite often you find that there is actually a a vehicle associated with the care home. There are a number of people who will have a small vehicle for themselves, and squeezing 4 kids and your co-parent into that one car may be an issue. And therefore, I wouldn't be surprised if a home of this size doesn't have a nominated vehicle. It may not have now, but it might do in a future orientation, in which case the cycle parking, convenient cycle parking, would be more important. It would also mean that of the spaces that we have available, there would only be 2 for people who are working on the site. However, my observation of the road is that if there were a lot more car parking on the road, we might actually reduce the speed of traffic, and it could improve road safety by having more likelihood of natural chicanes being created by parking on the road. It is a nice road. I've cycled along it. It's a bit of a drag up the hill. It's nice coming down, but it's not a bad area for a family to grow up in. I'm sure there are a lot of other families who already live on that road and who aren't constantly concerned and lobbying about the need for improved road safety. I'm happy for this, but I do ask that as part of that condition on cycle parking, we look for cycle parking that is going to be more convenient for both casual visitors. Your educational psychologist is allowed to turn up on a bicycle. They might like a cycle hoop in the front garden area for them to park their bicycle against for the half hour they're going to be in the building. So the interpretation of that condition is what I would be looking for, and I hope that officers are listening to that as well as the applicant. Thank you.
Ian, could we look at improving the cycling situation there, or cycling park?
Absolutely, Chair. Yeah, condition 4 is in an abbreviated format presently, so I will flesh it out and make it very specific on casual visitor parking and staff cycle parking, Chair, and take on board fully Councillor Kerr's comment.
Thank you. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add to what you and Mr Woodhead said and the operators, I think this is, it fulfils a really useful social need, and therefore I think I'll be approving it, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Anybody else? Okay, would somebody like to move the recommendation with the condition? Anybody second it? All those in favour? There's 5. Anybody against? 1. That recommendation is carried. Thank you. Okay, moving back to the agenda then, we're on to 58 to 101 land at St. Peter's Street, St. Peter's Churchyard rather. Paul is going to tell us about this.
Thank you, Chair. We have 2 applications here, one seeking planning permission, which I'll take first, and the second one, list of building consent. For this city centre site, I'm going to deal with them in tandem. Housekeeping for both. The Conservation and Heritage Advisory Committee has no objection and support the proposal, hoping it will improve that area of Derby. We've had further representation received concluding that this is a positive and beneficial contribution to the area of the city that has suffered over the years, and a letter of support has been received from St. Peter's Quarter Bid Company. You've all had copies of that, sorry, of those which were circulated previously. So the first one, this application seeks planning permission to use the open land at St. Peter's Churchyard as an outdoor street food market with 12 market stalls, seating, decking, ramps, all set on a raised surface and operating between 10 and 5 Monday to Sunday. There is some confusion in the application, but we've assessed it on 10 to 5, which was the latest information. The application site comprises a fairly small open space without a current access or parking area. It's located at the rear of St Peter's House, as many of you will know, is approximately 8-storey modern building, recently converted to residential use. And the site fronts onto St Peter's Churchyard, just off St Peter Street. It's hemmed in by buildings and contains a number of large mature trees. The streets, spaces and many of the buildings and plots, although altered over the centuries, contribute to the overall historical significance of this part of the city. The surrounding buildings include the small old grammar school bordering the site on its eastern side, which dates from the early 17th century. That is Grade 2 star listed. And just for reference, Grade 2 stars are the top 8% of the listed structures in the country, indicating a very high historical significance. As an open space, the open space reveals a restricted view of the listed building. The application site is an important component of the building's setting and makes a largely positive contribution to its significance as a designated heritage asset. I can't take reference. I can't accept that reference. It's not from me, it's from a previous inspector's appeal decision. That's what an inspector felt about this site. The St Peter's Church, which is situated adjacent and immediately to the east of the old grammar school, is also Grade 2 star listed. We've got 2 Grade 2 star listed buildings right adjacent to this site. Both the church and its boundary walls are listed, and the evidence before us indicates that the stone wall fronting the application site is included within the listing. Parts of the church date from the 14th century, with additions and alterations in the 16th and 19th centuries. Today, this church stands within a tightly defined site on the corner of St Peter's Street and St Peter's Churchyard, where its west tower is a major landmark, again, from the inspectors, early inspectors' considerations. And particularly given this constrained context, the application site forms an important part of the setting of the church in aesthetic terms, as a green space with a mature trees bounded by the stone boundary wall, offering a key view of the church tower down St Peter's Churchyard. Its historical, functional relationship also contributes importantly to the church's setting. The Grade 2 listed late 19th century former county court stands directly opposite the application site, and as members will know, much of the northern side of St Peter's Churchyard is lined by a grouping of good quality late 19th century commercial buildings. Thus the site, with its wall and its trees, forms a very major part of the setting of the listed buildings. You won't be surprised, I'm going to say historically this is a sensitive site given the setting of these heritage assets. There are a number of trees on site. They are protected by tree preservation order, with other vegetation protected by the conservation area setting of the site. A new access to this landlocked site. Now this site, although on the photographs you'll see an access and gateway, those are not part of this application site. This site has no pedestrian or vehicular access itself. It is proposed to have an access, pedestrian access, by the insertion of steps and a lift platform into the Grade 2 star listed wall, close to its junction with the Grade 2 star listed grammar school. This new opening would require a new sandstone retaining wall within the application site because there's a level difference. 2 trees are proposed as a result of this application, and as is cycle parking close to the new site's entrance, so close to the steps and or the lift. From your report, you will note the Marketing Derby support the proposed change of use and dispute Historic England's consultation response, which you will also note advises that harm would be caused by the proposal as a whole, transforming the character of the green space and erode the setting of the highly graded historic assets. As the proposal affects the setting of listed buildings and the conservation area, the statutory requirements for us is to have special regard to the desirability of preserving the listed building for its setting or any features of special architectural or historic interest which it possesses, and to pay special attention to the desirability of preserving or enhancing the character or appearance of the conservation area. These are in the Act, and they must be taken into account when determining this application. The National Planning Policy Framework is clear in the requirement to take account of the desirability of sustaining and enhancing the significance of historic heritage assets and the desirability of new development making a positive contribution to local character and distinctiveness. So I question, will this development, including the insertion of the new access into the listed wall, make that positive contribution to local character and distinctiveness? Significance can be harmed or lost through development with a heritage asset setting, and any harm or loss to significance should require clear and convincing justification. So in determining this application, members will need to weigh into consideration whether any public benefits associated with the scheme outweigh the harm caused by the impact of the proposed new development. Again, that's lifted from the National Planning Policy Framework. Overall, having reviewed such benefits, Historic England advised that planning permission should not be granted for any development within this important open space that is detrimental to the setting of St Peter's Church and Churchyard. Historic England has previously supported the view that this is an important open space within the conservation area and that development of this site is therefore unacceptable in principle. Their view remains unchanged, concluding that the applications they've made response to both applications do not meet the requirements of the National Planning Policy Framework, in particularly paragraphs 200 and 202, and our own Conservation Management Plan from 2013, as outlined in more detail in the report. I'll pause. County archaeologist, as stated in your report, has confirmed his objection that because of the archaeological sensitivity of the site, his concern is there would be a high potential for remains of early medieval, high medieval, and post-medieval remnants to survive within the site, and these could potentially include burials. He has therefore recommended a predetermination archaeological evaluation. He said, without the results of the evaluation, the application is deficient against the National Planning Policy Framework, paragraph 194, and objects on those grounds. So he's asking for more information. This includes the excavation for the new access through the retaining wall, because it's going through the new access goes through the retaining wall, and then I think it's 23 square metres of retained earth behind he's raising concern about. In planning policy terms, the proposal would give rise to a loss of public green space in an area deficient, and there's not been any assessment in accordance with our own policy CP17. And our policy team suggests that's an omission in the application. This application and your report brings to a head the questions of impact on the historic environment versus economic benefits arising from the scheme. On pages 88 and 89, identify the steps required to take when considering the impact and significance on designated heritage assets. The benefits, we are told, are from quantified footfall and employment opportunities, and they are listed on pages 91 to 93. Impacts of the scheme are rehearsed on pages 93 to 95, where I note that this site was the outdoor amenity space for St Peter's House residents, which has now been sold off. So, is this the right location for this development type, bearing in mind its historic setting and everything else that before? Planning balance and judgment on page 98 places greater weight in the specialist consultee responses, Historic England and the archaeology, agreeing that the level of harm is not outweighed by the public benefits, and following national and local planning policy, the development should be resisted. Your report promotes 2 reasons for refusal based on unacceptable harm to the Grade 2 star listed assets and the loss of the currently undeveloped open green space. I'll stop there. Chair, you have speakers for this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I believe the first speaker is Mr. Wardle. Welcome, Mr. Wardle. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I own and run the local company that has made the application. The reasons for choosing Derby for our investment are numerous. It's a developing and a growing city, a city with ambition. To name a few, we've got the Market Hall, Eastern Gateway, a nearby Beckettwell development, where we've got apartments, a performance venue, and further developments. Derby is a city with ambition. We want to be part of that ambition. We want to add to that investment. John, next to me, and the team at Lathams have done a wonderful job of bringing our initial design idea to life. Lathams are renowned heritage architects who have also worked alongside the council in planning the future of Derby. Lathams have comprehensively overcome all of the previous reasons for refusal. We have now spent 15 months on the planning of the project, ensuring that it is a sympathetic and an extremely well-designed proposal that will enhance and improve the area. Why a street food venue? Street food industry is growing exponentially year on year. In all major towns and cities in the UK across Europe, street food offerings are opening up in market halls, converting buildings and open spaces. Derby itself, as you know, has got the popular bustling market, and the new market hall will also become a similar street food destination. Our proposal will complement these, giving consumers further choice when visiting the city. Why St Peter's Churchyard? Location, we have the Beckettwell development, and St Peter's Churchyard will become an extremely busy thoroughfare between Derby on the Eastern Gateway and to Beckettwell. We want to add to and enhance all the new developments in the city, and we want to turn a neglected and forgotten piece of land into a thriving and enjoyable city centre offering. Consumers will have a variety of quality food and drink traders to choose from. They can sit and enjoy this rare green space in the city, enjoy the greenery and enjoy the views and enjoy the street scene. It will be a green development blending perfectly with the existing mature trees, with a green roof, further planting and a wildlife section for education and young people. The benefits are numerous and wide-ranging. Public to enjoy the space, job creation, further economic activity, crime and antisocial behaviour will be reduced. Sustainability, it's an extremely sustainable development with a very low carbon construction process, effectively a floating floor with no foundations to not damage the tree roots, and no excavation apart from the small entrance area. The development is such that in 50 years' time it could essentially be removed without leaving any trace except for the new access. We've had overwhelming support from a wide range of organisations, businesses and individuals. Marketing Derby, the St Peter's Quarter bid, St Peter's Church itself, various neighbours, the Down to Earth project, Maxwell Craven, and also the Conservation and Heritage Advisory Committee had supported the proposal and hoped that it would improve that area of Derby. Run out of time there.
Mr. Phipps.
Yeah, okay, thanks very much, Chair. Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, we appreciate that this is a sensitive site and that it's got a complicated...
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's got a complicated planning history, and obviously the issues to do with the previous appeal related not to a single-storey, low-rise, reversible collection of buildings, but it was to do with a wholly inappropriate residential block, which was going to have significant impacts. So we're not really talking about the same thing. So it's probably a good idea to get that clear to begin with. The other thing which is worth clarifying is that the wall is not listed. The wall is a curtilage listing, and it falls within the curtilage of a Grade 2 star building. So they're not the same things. So to conflate the two is misleading. The previous refusal, Historic England had claimed wrongly that the building, that the wall was actually falling within the listing, and it does not. And I think your own solicitor has concluded that. At the initial informal pre-app discussions, we had very positive feedback. There was no concern about the loss of open space, which, by the way, is private land, not public open space. I think anybody can see that. The significance was, the feedback said that the significance needed to be understood, and I think we've demonstrated that has been understood. The wall, the designation wall has been reviewed, and it's been accepted that it is not indeed a Grade 2 star structure. Max Craven, who I think is recognised as being an expert on the history of the historic fabric of Derby, says that the only perceived harm would be in having to make a new opening in the curtilage listed wall, which was incidentally built more than a decade after the remaining churchyard wall. So that statement alone suggests that the wall may not indeed be curtilage at all. It may just be another wall, if you follow the definition of curtilage precisely. And in terms of the issues to do with archaeology, again, Max goes on to explain that the land, it was raised in the 1970s during the construction of St. Peter's House. So the archaeology may consist of, 1970s wheelbarrows, potentially, I don't know. But in terms of the reason for refusal, the assertion was that there'd be harm to heritage significance of the wall itself, which we have established is not listed, but a curtilage listing. The surrounding conservation area, and in the conservation area character appraisal, it identifies specifically aspects of that site which are harmful to the conservation area, which we're addressing through the proposals. And I'm going to run out of time without getting to the end of what I was going to
I'm afraid so. Time catches up with all of us.
So,
would you like to come back on?
Thank you.
If I come back firstly on the listed or not listed wall and take members to pages 112 and 113 of your report, and thankfully Mr. Teasdale is here, we asked this very question. And Mr. Teasdale's legal advice is contained within your report, which, correct me if I'm wrong, Stephen, we consider it to be listed.
It is not. It does not actually form part of the. Apologies, Chair. I was just to repeat that. It certainly does not form part of the listing description of St. Peter's, and I think we're in agreement on that. But in terms of the test under Section 1.5 of the Listed Building and Conservation Act 1990, if you apply those tests, clearly, we clearly consider that it is a curtilage structure for the purposes in terms of the listing of St. Peter's Church. It forms part of the curtilage, and therefore it's our view that as part of that, it should be considered as St. Peter's Church is a Grade 2 star listing, and it therefore has the same protection as that church. And it should be considered on that same basis. But obviously, when considering even aspects of a Grade 2 star listing building, you will consider certain elements of that building more important than other elements of the building. That is sort of normal. And there's some elements of that building that would be fundamentally destroy the historic aspect of it. Some elements wouldn't, but it doesn't change the fact that it is a curtilage that is considered part of a Grade 2 star listing. So I think there might be a little bit of a disagreement between myself and Mr. Phipps on what he said tonight. I'd hasten to say that the planning inspector on the previous appeal considered it as part of the curtilage of St. Peter's. Similarly, Heritage England considers it should be regarded as a Grade 2 star in terms of assessing the matter, and that also is what our heritage officers are saying, and I accord with that view.
Thank you, Stephen. Mr. Phipps, his car's parked in the assembly rooms if you want to take him out afterwards. Members of the committee. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chair. This is a bit of an unusual one for me. I'm a member of the Conservation Area Committee, and all these arguments were rehearsed at committee. And I have to say, I'm disappointed that the officers are recommending refusal, because I agree with most of the arguments put forward by the applicants and their representatives. I've been through this a number of times, and it is a matter of judgment. I'm not convinced that the harm to putting a small opening in that wall, and remembering all that the rest is reversible, it outweighs the benefit, because this is an excellent site. It's on a thoroughfare that will go from the new Beckettwell Centre into the town centre, and it will definitely improve the vibrancy of that area. That churchyard is currently a bit of a dump, not to put too fine a point on it, so I disagree with the refusal, so I'll be voting against the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Carr.
Sorry, Chair, can I just come in on a point? I think sort of in terms of dealing with the application, what I think, as Paul said, it's important to deal with the application for the use and sort of, rather than the wall, the actual listed building application itself, because if you decide tonight to grant that first application, then that application clearly has public benefit that need to then be taken into account in relation to the heritage issues in terms of the listed building application. If you decide to refuse it, then obviously those public benefits don't arise. So I think there's just a process in terms of you see, I mean, what I'm saying is that obviously it would be claimed that there's public benefits in terms of sort of bringing that space back into use, or sort of economic benefits, etc. If that application, however, is refused, those benefits don't arise, and therefore sort of it's better or it's more appropriate to deal with that first application separately and first before you deal with the listed building.
Did you want to say anything else, Mike? No.
I'm still in favour of, I'm still against the refusal for the first application, Chair.
Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Chair. Many other cities enjoy these contained street market and retail spaces, and in my experience, they greatly enhance city centre footfall and support the local economy. And in Derby's case, that's extremely important right now. So for me, on balance, you know, I respect officers' view and the sensitivity of the site, but you know, I also believe that we should vote against officers' recommendation for refusal. You know, and if committee members are unsure, then at the very least, I would suggest a deferral and site visit to further explore the concerns raised by officers and Heritage England, for example. Thank you.
Councillor Rawson.
Thank you, Chair. Personally, I don't necessarily have any objections to the use of the space as a market or street food area, or however we describe it. Where my objection would lie is damage to the wall in order to access it. So I think it is a very difficult application to look at the fact that it's split into two parts. Are there any other alternative access routes into this development? From there's an access. Is it a car park into the Prosperity House? If other options been looked at for access, I guess is my question.
Through you, Chair. Yeah. I wish there was. Without wishing. There is an existing access to which used to serve this land and the rear of St Peter's House. That is not part of this application. if it were, you've almost negated the listed building hole in the wall because you've got an existing access that goes into the open space. Then we're just talking about the impact on the open space, open character of the area. But there is not, it's not part of this application, unfortunately.
Councillor Nawaz.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm exactly the same as what Councillor Holmes said. I'm really in favour of this, you know, the market, you know, street food coming to the city centre would be a great footfall for our city. Everything's closing and we need something like this. And I think it's a good idea to have it, and I want to go for it, this application against the officer's decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nawaz. Councillor Kerr, then Councillor Jennings, and then Councillor West. Full house.
You've all got opinions on this one. Mine are again split, because if you look back, there were statements here within the papers which say that this is a sort of abandoned site, and I hadn't realised that its ownership had changed. Because if you go back 5 years, you can look at the Google Street View from then, and it's an immaculate lawn. And it's been that green open space that you've not been able to access, and you rarely see anybody on for a good length of time. So its value as being outdoor space for St Peter's House, it was probably fairly limited, but it was green open space. This change is going to take away a lot of the greenness, particularly as we've lost one of the trees, which I think is shown on the other view that we've been having, which is a great pity. Trees overhead are fine, but it's green lower down is more its sort of human height, and that will be lost and replaced by more greenish built infrastructure. I'm concerned also about the use. There doesn't seem to be, despite the clear statements about this is a growing trend, this is really important, this is what other cities are doing. Have I overlooked a report that says this is actually what Derby needs, and there aren't already other schemes in place that would be competing with this? We have a lot of empty properties in the city centre at the moment, and we've had other schemes that have half come forward which could have been doing something like this in a slightly different form and could potentially still do that. And I think there is therefore a potential of oversupply of this sort of street food initiative, and being outdoors in all weathers, this may not be as attractive as some of the other options. And indeed the speaker said that market buildings, converted other buildings or something like that are other ways in which street food is seeing an increase in popularity in other areas. We have empty buildings. Perhaps one of the other existing empty buildings would be a better solution to street food than this one. And it'll make it more difficult for those empty buildings to be revitalised in future. So I haven't seen an economic justification for this use. I think it will be losing a green space. I think there might be a role for it in future. It may be that it is ahead of its time when we have a new arena and people going to and fro the new Beckett Well facilities. This might be something that comes into play. But my concern is that it could be constructed. Some of the elements of it I'm a little concerned about. You know, the toilet area, which I presume is for the public as well as for stall holders, is somewhat hidden around the back. I don't know what's happening about drainage and the impact of drainage on the heritage and where that will go. The land ownership issues of getting that out of sight could be a significant thing. I don't think it's the right place for a cesspit. The bins situation, I'm also somewhat concerned about. We've got bin stores around the side. They're all going to have to go up and down that lift. I can see our bin men or whoever commercial bin person is doing that, finding that as a real challenge. And like Councillor Orson, I would be saying, is there an alternative access that would make all those other things more accessible? And I think that negotiation with St Peter's House or Prosperity House, whichever it calls itself, and moving their gate back and going across third-party land
Councillor Kerr,
as an access
whilst
point
I
might be
appreciate your
helpful.
suggestions, but we're only looking at what's in front of us.
I know,
And we're
and
not,
this is why I
we've got
don't think-
nobody from St Peter's House to say, well, yes, we'll sell you this bit of land.
Chair, I don't think it needs to be sold. I think a way leave would be sufficient. But I'm just expressing my concerns about why we haven't got enough information here and enough information about that concept to be making a good decision tonight.
Thank you, Councillor. Just to say that, I mean, these are not bricks and mortar. There's stalls that are, being installed there. And the economic viability is up to the stall holders. If they don't get the footfall, they're not going to be there very long. Councillor Jennings.
May I disagree and say that economic development is one of the aspects of planning? We don't want to have a derelict collection of stalls stuck outside making an eyesore in a prime area.
Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Chair. I've got really a question for officers, really. I'm struggling to find a visual of the wall with the insert in it, because that's the main thing that is my concern. Overall, I'd like to see the impact of the proposal. Have we got one?
It's on its way, yes. It'll be on the screen very shortly. It's there, Chair, through you.
Yeah.
It's part of, the detail is part of the list of building application, which I was going to come to very shortly.
Was that it, Councillor Jennings, or did you want to continue? Okay. Councillor West.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Kerr said a lot of what I wanted to say, but I clearly didn't want to be the only councillor not speaking on this application. I think we as a committee have proven ourselves that we're not against development, but we have also proven ourselves right in the past not to rush ahead with demolishing buildings and walls in the city, just at the express concern of others. I have severe reservations of the potential harm to trees and to the site. I don't need to list those reservations because they're listed in the report for me. Officers and Historic England and many others have contributed to a report that say there are real concerns about this development. There's also concerns for the city, as Councillor Kerr has raised, that there are plenty of businesses and plenty of places that are empty, but plenty of businesses in the city that sell food within the city centre, that sell food that don't get the footfall, because we are going through a cost of living crisis and people cannot afford to eat, let alone to eat out. What I wouldn't want to see is development done to this site that then is just left empty after a very short time. But my real concerns are those that are, I've highlighted reams and reams of this document, and absolutely find in favour of officer's recommendation. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor West. Councillor Jennings, you wanted to come back very quickly.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Only that in general, I would actually support this, but I would like to defer, if possible, for a site visit, if members agree.
Councillor Jennings has suggested a site visit. Does anybody else feel that it's beneficial?
Chair, I have an alternative proposal, if I may, that we reject the officer's recommendation.
Yeah. I take it there's nobody seconding Councillor Jennings' proposal.
So there's a...
No, those in favour of a site visit?
well, they certainly can discuss that.
Yeah, in that case, you know, it's carried, we'll have to have a site visit. But there's not much point in discussing the second one, is there?
No.
Yeah, with that in mind, we're not going to look at the sort of insertion of access in the wall, then we'll wait until we've seen the premises, or rather the space, and then look at both the applications. Councillor Jennings, do you want to change your mind, or it's too late?
No, Chair. Just really, when we have this site visit, is it possible to invite the developer to attend? Just to explain their vision.
Well, I'm sure Mr. Phipps and Mr. Wardle would like to see us outside and tell us what they think of tonight's speaking. Yes, they'll come along.
If I may, Chair, they're nodding. If we're going to go on site, it has no access. So when you want to go on to the grassed area beneath the trees, we'll have to go in through the gates, which aren't in the application site. Yes, I think it would be a good idea for them to be there, yes.
Yeah, I just need to express sort of a warning, obviously, sort of in terms of you should not be receiving representations from the developer on site about their application, because this is a public meeting and the public won't be attending. So whilst you can go on site, I'm sure the officer who attends will guide you as regards sort of conduct of the site visit. If you're unsure, there's site visit protocols as part of the Constitution, but you should not be discussing the matter with the developer.
Sorry, did you want to say anything? Right, that's fine then. Okay, we'll organise one as quick as possible for you. Thank you. Okay.
I mean, I can go.
Right. The next item, pages 132 to 139, 38 Prince George Drive. To tell us about this is Aaron, who's been sitting there fairly quietly observing.
Thank you, Chair. This application site is located on the east side of Prince George Drive within the new Manor Kingsway estate near the hospital. Full planning permission is sought for the change of use of the existing dwelling into a residential care home for up to 3 children, used as their permanent residence, replicating a family home environment. Up to 2 care workers would be required at the home at any given time, including the day and overnight care, ensuring wraparound care at all times. A total of 26 objections have been received, and the main points are summarised on page 133, section 4 of your report. The proposal consists of change of use to an alternative form of residential accommodation within an existing residential area. It is well-established social care practice for children and young people in need of care being placed into a home or residential setting. And clearly, there is such a need for this accommodation. As the proposed number of bedrooms at the property would remain unaltered, there would be no substantive intensification of use, rather a difference in activity to which that may be anticipated in the normal residential use of a house. The use and associated activity, including comings and goings of care workers, would be unlikely to cause a greater level of disturbance or amenity harm than could be expected by a C3 use of a large 4-bedroom family home. Other health professionals and social workers may also visit the property, which is entirely reasonable. Young people and children could reside in any typical residential dwelling, and it is considered the proposal is not likely to result in any additional antisocial behaviour than what could be generated by the existing residential dwelling. In terms of highways, Prince George Drive is a permit holder only parking. A garage and driveway exist to the side of the property, and there may be site photos that show an average sized car parked on that driveway. There's also a private access drive outside the application property, which could be utilised in front of the hedge, but that is a private access drive. The change of use would not have an unacceptable impact upon highway safety or severe impact upon the adjacent highway network. As per your report, a recommendation to grant plan permission is given. Chair, there are two speakers, the agent and a resident, to address committee.
Thank you, Erin. First speaker is Mr. Malkin, I believe. Good evening, welcome, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and many thanks for the opportunity to speak in support of our client's application at Prince George Drive. The application proposes the conversion of an existing dwelling to a C2 use as a care facility. It proposes that the property will be occupied by 3 children and up to 2 carers working alternate shift patterns. On-site care will be provided at all times. Your officer's detailed report sets out clearly the planning merits of the proposal and the material considerations upon which planning committee can make their decision. The property will be occupied in a very similar way to other dwellings in the street and the wider city. No external alterations are proposed, whilst vehicle movements will not exceed those of a typical residential property. With regards to the amenities of existing residents, the occupation of the property will be limited to 3 children alongside their carers. This level of occupation will be similar to a typical family home and will not result in increased noise or disturbance to neighbours. A large number of comments have been received relating to perceived potential for antisocial behaviour or criminal activity. These are not material planning considerations and can be controlled under separate legislation. Having been involved in similar applications previously, we're acutely aware of how such proposals are perceived by the local community. However, we wish to make the committee fully aware that the applicants have a background in specialist childcare. The facility will be operated in accordance with the stringent legislation that covers proposed operations, as well as being fully inspected by Ofsted. The home will provide a safe space for children to develop and grow in a non-institutionalised environment. Each child will have a specific care package, which will be followed during their time in care, and in terms of education, this may include homeschooling or attendance at a specialist education facility. Small homes, such as the one proposed as part of this application, play a significant role in the government's approach to the care of children with emotional, behavioural or learning difficulties. The aim is to enable children in care to live as normal lives as possible within the community, and the operation of such homes seeks to create a family-orientated environment where children can thrive and achieve positive outcomes. We very much hope that you follow your officer's recommendation and grant planning permission for this proposal, which will provide a much-needed facility for disadvantaged children. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Malkin. You're the first one that's finished a minute earlier. Mr. Fried, good evening, welcome, and you have 3 minutes as well.
Good evening, thank you. Yes, I'm James. I've been a resident there since 2014, so 8 years, and they say it's a proposal, but they have moved in. They moved in at first on January. We had no idea what was going on. There was no provision to say, oh, there's going to be a care home here. They just moved in, cars all around. That is the back of the property there. If you see the front, there is provision at the front on the driveway there. You can fit in 2 small cars, but normally they have 1 medium-sized car. There's no access to the garage, and they are covering where that bush is and behind it. So whenever they have a visitor, they are blocking my driveway and access to the road. Also, that is used as a pavement, and people with pushchair when a car's parked cannot get by. They have to walk all the way around. So it's impacting the residents, both access, it's impacting my property, the one right next to it, right there, because not only do I have trouble getting in and out, or have been blocked in multiple times, they also, when visitors come, such as social workers or visitors, family members, they sometimes park on my driveway. They just straight up trespass or block me in. And that is affecting not just myself, but everyone else, because they've been here with the 3 children. There was more than 2 care workers, and they have been, it's not likely, it has happened, of social disturbance all hours of the day. Across the road from that property is a certain property, but they have a child there who has severe autism, Part of that is a sound aspect. So whenever there is a disturbance, they are disturbed. Normally, multiple times, 2 in the morning-ish. You can see the property outline there. The driveway could just about fit in 2 small cars. It cannot, but across that, can't quite remember the number off the top of my head, but yeah, they have a downstairs conversion to the garage, which is the bedroom of the said child, more young adult at this point. And whenever there is a disturbance, they are awakened, which awakens the family, it's causing problems with their routine, and it's for the other residents as well. The large White House on the corner, for example, when they were using it in the past month, actually, they came and left between January and March, using it full-time as a care home with these multiple disturbances, including behaviours such as threat of arson to one of the neighbours down the road. They were most upset. There were police reports. There's also been reports of multiple antisocial behaviour, such as near misses of children. There's an incident whilst using an illegal electric scooter. But also, in the past month, when visitors came to visit current child and care home there, they did threaten the White House in the corner with smashing the windows in. So it is antisocial behaviour that has not existed in our neighbourhood until they moved in, prior to even making an approval request. Again, which was only enforced because someone complained and someone pointed it out. If they're only going to act upon threat or measures, then what kind of company is this?
Thank you, Mr. Pride. Aaron, would you like to come back on any of that?
Thank you, Chair. Just clarification for committee that our enforcement team were notified of the use of the property in sort of January time, I believe it was, and the enforcement team contacted the applicant, and subsequent to that, an application was submitted, but as we believed, the use ceased for a period of time, a matter of, I think, weeks or a few months, but that's the context to that. Hopefully that provides some clarity.
Paul.
I think, sorry, I'm preaching to members for your benefit. Planning is concerned with the appropriateness of the land use. Is that site, is that property suitable for the use proposed? Yes or no? Irrespective of who runs it. Okay? So we can't control the suitability of the users, how they operate, their management regime, whether they park on your drive, block your driveway or not. We can't control that, but what we can take into account is that site suitable for the use proposed, the land use proposed? And the conclusion in the report is that it's a residential use in a residential neighbourhood, and as we heard previously, it needs planning permission, quite rightly, but it's a slight difference from the residential use in terms of the nature of the occupiers. It's the sort of use you would expect to find. If it was well run, well managed, and they didn't park on your drive and they didn't, I don't know, upset the neighbours, you would hardly know they were there. And it's the land use we need to focus on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor West and then Councillor Rawson.
Thanks, Chair. I appreciate there are issues re parking. I think condition 2 in the report states that we can do something to do with the outlining of parking. Sorry, I'm scrolling between screens again. But if we can look to show the correct location of off-street car parking and do something to denote that to make things better for visitors and for residents, that would be super. It's clearly not the first application that's come to this committee. We've had another one tonight. We've had a few this year. I'm really disappointed to hear in the list of objections that placing children in decent residential areas is not the answer. Placing children in decent residential areas is where children should be. I won't say anything else on this application other than I support it 100%.
Thank you, Councillor West. Councillor Rawson.
Thank you. I would just echo what Councillor West has said about that particular comment. However, I think we have heard from the resident that parking is a real issue in this case, as I suspect it will be in the other one that we've considered as well this evening. And I think having one up and running and already having the experience of it does suggest that there are considerably more car journeys associated with a residential children's home of this nature than any other residential property. So I thank the resident for raising that, and that is a material planning application issue when considering a planning application. Is it going to generate additional car journeys, and is that going to have an impact on other people living round and about? So for the same reason as the other earlier application, Chair, I can't support this one for that reason.
Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. And just before we move that picture, which is gone, I just want to highlight that where that car is parked off the street at the moment is not part of the application site. That is the parking for house number 40 next door, I believe. I don't know what it is. Yeah, Mercedes. I'm not a car person. As opposed to the Audi, which is driving down the street or possibly parked badly. So that is not parking for the property we're talking about. And so don't consider it to be. The problem we have on this site is the parking. And there's the recommendation there, there's a condition there that sort of highlights where the red area includes. There is residents-only parking on the main aspect of the Prince George Drive and Prince Edward and Prince William, or whole of that estate. But where we have the walkways, the shared surfaces, where you can drive to gain access to the off-street parking for the majority of the properties along that run, is not adopted. None of it's adopted, but it doesn't have the residents' parking permits on it either. So in terms of bad parking generally, it is enforceable by our team because that's who does the parking enforcement. But the bit directly outside the front of the house is not included with that, and that is where people have been habitually parking. I've been there several times, and there has been parking on that piece at the front. It obstructs pedestrians wanting to walk along that route. You can see the other side, which is just in that picture. There is no footway on that side of the road because the footway is the driveway down the front of those properties. As soon as you park there, you can't go past, and you're obstructing pedestrians, and they have nowhere safe to go. They're on the main carriageway. So if there isn't sufficient parking and off-street parking here, we have an issue of either we've got a residence permit and we've got to get your visitor's permit sorted out, which is a hassle for any professionals who are turning up to visit those children, or you've got a problem of the residents, the main, the routes, the regular staff needing to park with residents' parking permits, business permits, and the others not. Now, that situation is what is causing the biggest hassle factor for this being not a conventional home. If this was a family with 4 kids, they could all fit in there, a couple of kids in a shared bedroom. It might be a pair of adult children who are sharing a bedroom. They may all have cars, but they will have residence permits. They will know what they are doing, and they will be parking in the right place. But where you have coming and going of different people on a more regular basis, which we can prevent by not changing the use of this house, we can be preventing a problem for a lot of people in that area. And it's because of this nature of the residential parking and the areas that are being used for parking because they look convenient without people thinking about the needs for pedestrians that is the issue here. And I don't think, for those reasons, this is a suitable property for be moving over into a different type of residential use. So I would encourage members, regardless of the suitability of the general site, which I agree with, it's the specifics of the parking and the residential parking and the unadopted nature of that strip, which means it cannot be enforced, is the issue. The alternative, Chair, would be to ask for the applicant to change the nature of the residential parking agreement that we have, and for the residential parking to be included on that pavement footway stretch, which it isn't at the moment. So here's a picture showing where people park, blocking the pavement, blocking access for people wanting to leave. Thank you for the picture.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Paul?
It's visitors, those without a parking permit are not entitled to park on the adopted highway. So if you haven't got a permit, you can't park on the highway. Well, you can, but you might get a ticket and or you may have to. No,
So it isn't adopted highway. None of this is adopted highway. It's public highway. It isn't adopted and it will not be adopted. There are problems with the drainage. Too complicated. Don't worry about that.
And if I was a visitor and I don't have a residence permit, so I can't park on the street, and I clearly can't park on the private land in front of the property because it's access and pedestrian access to somebody else's, speakers and others, property, I have nowhere to park. So therefore I've got a choice. I go somewhere where I can park, or I do not visit the property and I walk more sustainable. And I don't think it's in the applicant's gift to control those. If we refuse it, turn on its head, if we refuse it, where's the harm? What is the harm that we're saying is going to come from this proposal? That the occupiers could have a permit. It's the visitors that we're concerned about, and all the visitors are going to have to do is park elsewhere and walk to the site. But I think that's a little out of our gift.
Chair, may I just say that the nearest non-controlled parking to there will be in Mickletown, on the other side of Burton Road, in Mackworth, or some way into Abbey Ward.
Councillor Kerr.
The only way you could park legally near here would be pretending you were going to the hospital and using the hospital car park. That would be the nearest approved parking.
You make it sound as if this is the only place that's going to be in the city of Derby that doesn't have a parking space. There's lots of care homes, nursing homes, schemes that you can't park outside there. So does that mean we'll say, well, no, you can't do this? Those people who are going to visit there will obviously going to visit, whether it's one of the children or see the staff or change the staff. They have a simple choice. Either they can catch a taxi, catch a bus, walk, or, as Paul said, risk parking there and getting a £35 ticket. So this is not the first, application we've seen where there's insufficient or no parking. Would anybody else like to contribute? If not, would somebody like to move this? Councillor Nawaz.
What Councillor Kerr is saying, I totally agree with her, because we're giving a permission to this property will be, harming the residents who live there, right? You've got to look after the residents as well. It'll be giving problems. Like I live on a residence parking only. I know what the feeling. People just park there and go and don't bother. But you've got to look after the residents as well as the property. Thank you.
Thank you. Would somebody like to move this, Councillor West? Somebody second it? Nobody want to second this?
Right, I close it there. Move to then. Somebody want to put a review?
Does somebody want to put an alternative proposal then?
Chair, do you want to express what grounds?
I would reject this on the grounds as I expressed, to do with the control of parking, the lack of parking in the area, and the risk, the proven problems with parking, because it is a residential parking area and only parts of the potential parking are controlled in that manner. And I can go into more detail with it if you want to check wording.
I think
Somebody like to second that? Councillor Rawson. Those in favour of Councillor Kerr's proposal? Those against?
Casting vote. Are you using your casting vote?
Yes. We've not refused it on those grounds. We haven't granted it either, so we're in for a long night.
Would be useful if officers went away and sorry, but I think it would be useful if officers went away and actually investigated whether there are alternatives and what the actual issue is. I think come back to members with that.
Okay. Would somebody move that we defer this and for further information? Second. All those in favour? Five. Anybody against? Not that it matters, but right, we'll defer this and get some further information on the parking issues.
Thank you, Chair. We appear to be stacking them up for next time. Thank you.
Okay, pages 140 to 149, 31 Mount Carmel Street. To tell us about this is Erin again.
Can I just mention, Chair, that it goes on beyond 149 to bits at the very end of the report. It's wonky.
Thank you, Chair. This application relates to 31 Mount Carmel Street, a residential location in Arboretum Ward. It is a semi-detached property divided across a ground, first and second floor. Full plan permission sought for the change of use from a dwelling to a 7-bedroom, 7-occupancy house in multiple occupation, also known as a HIMO. The submitted floor plan shows two self-contained rooms upon the ground floor with a communal area to the rear, plus an external cycle store. At first floor, there would be 3 self-contained rooms and 2 bedrooms at second floor level with additional storage. A total of 17 objections have been received, and these are summarised on page 141 of your report. There are 3 other existing licensed HIMOs along Mount Carmel Street at numbers 17, 18 and 21. Immediately next door at number 33, the property has been converted to 5 flats. Taken cumulatively, the presence of a 4th HIMO within Mount Carmel Street, which consists of 40 dwellings, would represent 10% of the street in HIMO use. Nonetheless, it's considered it would not result in over-concentration or a substantive change to the residential character of the street. In residential amenity terms, the potential noise nuisance and levels of activity may be higher than that of a single household. However, it's difficult to conclude that the potential disturbance would be significantly adverse in amenity terms. And of course, in terms of permitted development rights, this could be operated lawfully as 6-person HIMO. With regards to highway matters, it is noted that Mount Carmel Street is generally heavily parked on both sides of the road. It's a cul-de-sac with a small turning circle at the head, and a number of objections highlight existing parking problems and the potential greater demand for on-street parking. To be clear, the scheme does not include any off-street parking provision. The council's highway officer confirms the development would not lead to a severe impact upon the adjacent highway network or lead to unacceptable impacts. A recommendation to grant and permission is given. Chair, there are no speakers for this application.
Members of the committee. Councillor Rawson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think this is an unacceptable application, again, for very similar reasons as we've explored in the past and this evening. 10% of the street already in houses in multiple occupation, to me, does represent an over-intensification in this particular street. Existing parking problems are ongoing, and this is only likely to add to those. So again, I won't support it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rawson. Councillor Nawaz.
Yeah, I totally agree what Councillor Rawson has said. It's in my ward, and I'm totally against this. With the parking, there was such an issue that you can't even park there if you go daytime, nighttime. And if there are already HMOs properties, we don't need any more in this street. It's a dead end. You know, the other side you can't get out in the street. It's totally dead end. And this was a nice, quiet family street, but now we don't want this HMO with 7 flats, and I'm totally against it. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Chair. This is just another example of HMO where it's completely unsuitable. That location in particular, with no parking. We hear applications for HMOs all the time, and we always look at parking provision. And sometimes they're not. We think that they're not acceptable, but we are past them. This one is quite clearly unacceptable, and I won't be supporting it.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr.
This just shows our lack of control over these things. They're asking for 7 bedrooms. For 6 bedrooms, we have no control at all. So if we say no tonight, they can just open with their 6 bedrooms, and we have less control than if we said, we want to have everybody who moves in there to have a travel plan. What is your travel plan going to be for this? We want to have some guidance put in about waste management, otherwise the bins will be left on the street. We're talking about 1 bedroom between us having a little bit of control and us having no control at all. And that's the way I look at it. We may not like them, we may not want them, we may not want them to be registered. It could register next week for 6 bedrooms, and it will be there as another spot on that map we just saw. It's the situation, Chair, that is wrong. It's the lack of control that we have in Derby over what we feel is appropriate for Derby. It's not our fault. But if we want to have that little bit of control, and we want to advise the landlord, the operator, whoever it is, that they need to be a good landlord and to listen to us, we have to have that control through planning and not just through housing regulation. That's the way I look at it, Chair. It's the least we can do. It's what we need to do.
Thank you, Chair. I believe it was Brighton Road area. There was an appeal decision, and Councillor Kerr has clearly been reading that appeal decision because the inspector said exactly that. He said they want to go from 6 to 7. It's an extra 1. Yes, there was no car parking at Brighton Road, but he allowed it at appeal, and the conditions, I don't think there were any conditions imposed on, because the inspector took the applicant's details and said, it's only one more, no harm, proof. We have the opportunity to, even if they're notes to applicant informatives, to actually get the owners to sit up and take notice of our concerns as a committee, bearing in mind what they can do, and try and get them to travel plan or whatever mechanism we do to try and help these users fit better into a location to the area. Thank you, Chair.
Well, I'm afraid I disagree with that. I mean, if we are to license or approve this as a 7-bed tonight, what that suggests is the next application that comes in could be for 8. And we say, well, they can get away with 6, we don't need to worry about 2. What we want to do is to make a statement like we are trying to when it's been in the papers with Article 4, etc. And when we are setting up a working group, look at it. What we are trying to say to people is no, we're not going to give you planning permission to put up these, especially the street that already has 3. And Aaron maybe knows how many live in 17 and 18 Mount Carmel Street. There's quite a lot that live in there. That street, the police are around there 3-4 times a day. We have antisocial behavior all the time. Residents complain to us, to the neighborhood team. The steps that go from Mount Carmel Street to Burton Road are littered with drugs, needles, empty bottles, and if we're going to put something else up there that's licensed, yeah, fair enough, it may only be difference of 1 bedroom, but it's sending a message out there to say, we are not going to approve this. We're not going to make people's lives a misery simply because you want to. It's a case of, saying enough is enough. Yes, they can go with 6 rooms. Housing standards licensing will look at it. We approve it as 7. What realistic control do we have over these? Is any one of us going to go around and examine what they're doing or not? No, we're not. We leave it to the officers. Do they go around if people report it? I don't know. But what we are saying is that we're not accepting this application as a 7-bed because we believe the street already has enough, the residents have suffered enough, and there is already plenty of evidence of antisocial behavior, drug taking, sort of litter, and the fact that there's an alleyway going from Mount Carmel Street to Empress Road. There's evidence of, prostitution and what have you that goes on there. So do we really want to be responsible for saying, yeah, it's okay, it's only an extra bedroom? Well, I'm afraid it's not the extra bedroom, it's the principle of this that we're looking at, and it's the message that we want to send out to developers in other streets where they will turn a 5-room one into 7-1. We want to say enough is enough. We want applications that are good and right. Tonight we approved it. We have turned some down, we have deferred some, and I believe that this is not something that I can approve. I'll turn up, it wouldn't matter where it is. This is not right because of the street, because of the fact that it has 3 already there, and as I said, numbers 17 and 18 aren't small IMOs. They've probably got 12, 15 people resident in them too. Councillor Holmes.
Totally agree with what you said, Chair. And I also agree with Councillor Rawson has given succinct reasons if someone wants to propose us to refuse this. I think the material reasons are exactly what he stated.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor West.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I was quite disturbed at agreeing with Councillor Kerr's comment, and I do agree with Councillor Kerr's comment because it is a difficult one for us as a committee to say, where do we draw the line and where do we put sort of approval so that things are done properly. But you then went on to say exactly what I would have said, that we have to make that decision. That's what we're here for. Yes, it could go to appeal. The inspector could say, actually, I side with the committee. I know that street well. I grew up 3 streets away from it, as I was saying to Councillor Holmes. 30 years ago, it was an over-intensified street, completely different to some of its neighbouring streets. That was 30 years ago, and I have no idea how much more over-intensified it is. But I think if we grant this application, it's a detrimental impact to the lives of the people who already live there. You know, people have made it their home. There are people that have lived there for a long time. It's not just HIMOs, but it's a high percentage of HIMOs, and that's just the ones that we know about. You know, that's not the unregistered, unlicensed houses where people have a room in a house and there are extra people living there than we would assume. So again, Councillor Rawson said things earlier. It's contrary to Safe Policy GD5 of our local plan. It's the same wording that I repeat at each meeting. And yeah, absolutely against it. Sorry, officers.
Just a word of caution, we haven't got reasons for refusal have to be based on policy. We have no policy for over-intensification. You might want to steer away from that. But GD5 has been mentioned, general amenity policy, which you might wish to consider.
I think
Could I suggest some wording, Chair? In the opinion of the local planning authority, the proposal would have a detrimental impact on the character of the immediate area and the residential amenities enjoyed by existing neighbours in terms of increased activities, associated disturbance and the over-intensification of the use of this dwelling house. The proposal would also serve to increase pressure on existing on-street parking levels on surrounding highways, which would also, as a result, detrimentally impact on neighbouring amenities. For these reasons, the proposal is contrary to Safe Policy GD5 of the adopted City of Derby Local Plan Review and the overarching guidance in the National Planning Policy Framework, which seeks to protect the amenities of individuals who are affected by the development of land and buildings.
Councillor West, you typed that very quickly.
Can I offer you a job? John, sit here.
Okay, all right. Would somebody like to sort of speak in case there was...
So, Chair, sorry, first I should say, you need to, first of all, put, presuming you are proposing refusal on that basis, you then need to second it and then take vote.
Okay, somebody second that? All those in favour?
Right, that's unanimous. I know it's not, so Councillor Kerr, to you.
Yeah, Councillor Kerr votes again.
And can I just ask Councillor West, it would be useful to, if we could have a copy of that. You were speaking, even the fastest person up here couldn't keep up with that in terms of writing.
We'll need somebody to speak there, should it go to appeal. Councillor West, we'll need somebody to speak should it go to appeal. That's it. Councillor West is volunteered. Right, thank you very much for that. And now we come to the most exciting bit again, potential site visits. Who's going to tell us about them? Sarah, you're sitting right at the end. I'm so used to having you on my right hand that I have to keep looking the other way today.
Okay, so the first one is Wiltshire Road. It's a change of use of the first floor of the retail units, above the retail units, from offices to 11 apartments. New windows, doors and balconies.
No?
The St Mary's School has already been approved, so move on from that one. This will be familiar, Derby Triangle. It's reserve matters for erection of 3 commercial units, similar to the ones that are already.
Okay.
This is Alistry Firs. This one will be coming to a forthcoming committee. Demolition of the existing house, erection of 10 dwelling houses.
Anybody else want to visit it? Okay, we'll have a site visit there, Lucy. I never want to disappoint you.
Okay, next one is Charnwood Street, demolition of a garage, erection of 10 residential units in apartment block with parking. So three-storey apartment block in the back garden.
Yes. Okay, we'll go to that one then.
Next one is the variation of a condition for retail, sports and leisure, so probably not so interested in that one. Convent of Mercy, this is a change of use of the convent building to residential use and erection of apartments for 27 units.
Anybody fancy that?
It's a gated site, isn't it?
It's partly surrounded by woodland.
I suspect it might be a future application coming from the committee, and there are significant public objections.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, this is the former Duke of Clarence pub, demolition of the pub building and erection of a, I think it's 3-storey or 4-storey possibly apartment building, 11 apartments and a micro pub on the ground floor on the edge of the conservation area.
Unfortunately, the pub is not open, so...
just about to say that. Don't raise your head, the pub's not open yet.
Okay, next one. This is a change of use of the ground floor of this building, which used to be Reliance Electrical, to 16 apartments. The upper floors have already been converted and extended for student accommodation. Probably you can see it from the street. This is a variation of condition of an approved scheme for the Kingsway Hospital mental health facility, so it's very minor changes. The approved scheme. And the final one, it's 10 to 14 St Helens Street. Some members may recall it. It's the locally listed buildings, former marble works. This scheme is to convert and extend to form 10 student accommodation, 59 bedroom flats. It is, yeah. It's conversion and some extensions to those buildings. No, I think they're locally listed. Yeah, listed buildings. That's it, yeah. Thank you, Chair.